We're back in hour number 3 on Thursday, the 28th of August, and Tim is here with our pre-Labor Day announcements of what's going on in geopolitical assessment of what's happening in the world, and military and assessment, and peace is breaking out all over, or you may spell it P-E-A-C-E, or you might, being geopolitically correct, which is the dark side of humor, P-I-E-C-E, which is the so-called peace in Gaza, the meetings between Poroshenko and Putin, whatever's going on, peace is breaking out all over, isn't it, Tim?
Yeah, well, not really, but
I know, that's why I'm being sarcastic about it. It appears to be, or they announced it that way in the news, and before you know, no, shucks, we didn't get peace. But we did get peace, P-I-E-C-E, pieces of people, buildings, pieces of countries chopped apart. I guess they get what they want, which is volcanism, death, destruction, environmental hazards. I mean, they're getting peace, all right.
We basically, the entire world is in the grip of a globalist, Zionist, Luciferian death cult.
Right.
That's intent on killing off most of the human race.
Exactly.
Today, the big breaking news is NATO and Porky, as I call him, Poroshenko, the so-called president of the coup junta in Ukraine, have both said that Russia has invaded Ukraine.
Which is ridiculous.
Well, as one of the Donbass officials said, no, we're doing the fighting. If Russia had invaded, they would already be in Kyiv, and they'd have all of Ukraine. But what is happening is Russia has been fighting kind of a very low-level war by supporting the Russian-speaking people in the two areas of southeastern Ukraine. And the two biggest cities there are almost surrounded by Ukrainian fascist forces. They're using heavy weapons to shell into the city. They've killed a lot of civilians. Last week there was the big effort by Russia to finally get some fuel, some food, water, baby food, medicine to these people that are trapped. By the way, there's about 1 million Ukrainians living in tents inside of Russia as war refugees. And there's a big ethnic cleansing aspect to this, and even genocide aspect to this. The former prime minister of the Ukraine, little blondie that just got out of prison when the coup released her from her cell, or a few things like embezzling billions of dollars and all that. Anyway, right. She wanted to use nuclear weapons to nuke the Russians in eastern Ukraine.
You're talking about Yulia Tymoshenko.
Yes, Yulia. Anyway, not bad-looking lady, but on the outside, but pure evil on the inside. Now, so the Russians have had to increase their level of covert aid, and there are also a lot of people from Eastern Europe that are volunteering to fight the fascists. There are a lot of Greeks that have come in on the side of Donetsk and Lugansk. There are people from Serbia and various places, and of course all over Russia. There are volunteers. And I rather suspect that they've set up some organizations that are for serving special forces troops, that though officially they resign and then they join some group or another, then they go in as a volunteer with parenthesis around that name. But it's been very covert. It's a little bit more overt now in the last 2 weeks because they've had to rush a lot of supplies in to keep these two cities falling. And what has really got the junta in an uproar is they've opened up a new front in southwestern Ukraine, and they don't like that. But the thing is, this area is an extremely sensitive area. There was a German article out today saying essentially that this could lead to the Third World War. And it could.
It's the main area where the pipelines enter from Ukraine into Europe.
Say again? I'm sorry, what?
It's the main area where pipelines carrying oil and gas from Ukraine and from Russia enter into Europe. It's the pinch point.
And it's not winter yet, but it's beginning to cool off, and they're probably going to have a very bad winter. Certainly in the UK they are. If Russia cuts the spigot, Germany will basically just about freeze because they use Russian natural gas and Belarusian natural gas to power essentially their cities, to power their electric generating plants and to heat most of the homes. So Russia has a trump card. She really hasn't played it yet. Russia, a lot of people don't make this connection, but believe me, it's a very, very real connection. The events in Ukraine are totally tied into the events in Israel, in Gaza, in Syria, and Iraq.
And, of course, you heard the latest announcement that they killed 250 Syrian soldiers by ISIS. They now call them IS, or the Iraqi State, the Islamic State. These guys are trained in a town in Jordan by American Special Forces Academy, which is Blackwater Security.
Exactly. Well, they're led by a fella who the mainstream news media refers to as Ayu Bakr al-Abad. Howsoever, he is not the Arab that he claims to be, nor is he a Muslim. He's a good Jewish boy from Israel. His mother and father are Jewish Israeli citizens. He's an Israeli actor, and he's a very well-trained Israeli Mossad agent. And you notice that ISIS has not been saying anything about Israel. They didn't support the Palestinians in Gaza. ISIS was set up by the CIA and the Mossad, and it was funded by them and Saudi Arabia and Qatar, applied through Turkey, and trained by the U.S. Army and CIA in Jordan. And it's designed, we've had several instances where we almost had a general Middle Eastern war, which would become the Third World War. Putin was involved very deeply in a couple of them in preventing it from happening. 2 years ago, Israel and the United States were hell-bent on attacking Iran, which would have been absolute insanity. And Putin basically laid the law down, and so we backed off. There also was a point at which many of our senior officers threatened to revolt, and that put the kibosh to things. And then about a year and a half ago, there was this scam that Syria was using its chemical warfare agents against its own people, which was a lie. The few that were used by the foreign-backed fighters that were in, the Western-backed fighters that were in Syria. But Putin sent a very large, very well-equipped naval battle fleet into the Eastern Med and parked them offshore of Israel and Syria. And that and the fact that enough people in the British House of Commons had enough sense to realize that we were looking at the Third World War and they didn't want to die, and they kind of began a revolt. So we didn't go to war. So
I think what it is the House of Commons in Britain had a chance to see a 30 to 60 second commercial of life in a bunker. And this little commercial was probably played only for parliamentarians, so they could sit around in their frocks and they say, "Oh my God, dear, I don't think we want life in a bunker." In fact, after 1 month, welcome back, and Tim, let's hit on some of the major stories because you're going to be leaving as we bring on Chris at the bottom of the hour. I think Putin is playing this game very cleverly with Mr. Poroshenko, and I think here's the dialectic. I think that Poroshenko will either make a deal and stop the destruction of eastern Ukraine, when they start having a dialogue for real elections, Poroshenko will be gone, and he'll either cooperate, or Russia will eventually invade, and Poroshenko will be put through a military trial and executed. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I could imagine Putin when he was looking at him, thinking, "You're a dead man because I'm going to put you in front of a firing squad, or I'm going to put you, I'm going to watch him put a hangman's noose around your neck."
I get a kick out of Putin because Putin, you see, is a shorter guy, but he's a guy you don't mess with. He's like one of these what we call ultimate fighters. That's like 5'6", 5'7". But I don't care if you're 7 foot tall. You mess with this guy, you're going to be on the ground in seconds, and you're going to be tapping out, or you're going to be facing a lot of pain and suffering. And this is what's going to happen to Kiev, the Kiev government, and Mr. Poroshenko, because Putin is not one to mess around with. He's playing this game extremely the cards close to his chest. But he's got some ace cards here. The ace card with Germany, it turns out the primary negotiator to determine what's going to happen with NATO is none other than the Chancellor, Angela Merkel.
Yeah, and you know, she is really getting a lot of flack from German businesses because the so-called sanctions against Russia are really biting into most of Europe, and certainly Germany bad.
Why are they doing this? I mean, this is suicidal for European fruit industry. It's for German technology. It's going to literally cause them to have a spasm and to shut everything down.
What you have is this, and I didn't originate the term Luciferian death cult, but I think it's a good term. I got it off of Veterans Today. But I think this combination of the global banking cartel families that are Satanists and the extreme Zionist Netanyahu government, the crowd, they are so determined to have a general Middle Eastern war. That's what ISIS is all about. They're so determined to have a third world war so they can reorganize everything. And it is, I maintain that it is, from a human perspective, clinical insanity.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, there's no way that you can look at it and say these are sane people. But they're following a non-worldly, an alien, as in not from this planet, agenda. And that agenda is a very dark spiritual one. It's a demonic Luciferian one. Right. And, I don't care if you're a trillionaire, billionaire, and you've got all kind of cities underground you can go to. If you're looking at polluting the planet with radiation, you won't live long enough, nor will your great-great-great-great-grandchildren, that they can come out safely. And then again, at least without the intervention of God, and then again, when you talk about some of these genetically engineered viruses that are so horrific, and we're seeing one that's been deliberately released now, Ebola, Red Death, the one thing about a genetically engineered virus, because it has not been exposed to the outside environment and the millions of different viruses and stuff that they will come in contact with on a daily basis, and because they are snipped together, they tend to be very unstable and they mutate at a higher rate. Now, there are very sophisticated programs that can, in theory, predict the rates of mutations of engineered viruses, but there's an old saying about computers, trash in, trash out. You simply don't have the data points to do that realistic. So what I'm saying is, you may release something like Ebola, Red Death, and you've got a vaccine for it, and you think, I'm going to come out.
Or you got ZMapp, or this new vaccine from British Columbia, that Burnaby, BC, where they basically say they've got a carrier adeno or cold virus carrying Ebola genes. We know the ZMapp, which is a monoclonal antibody, can help people, but there's a limited capacity to make it, and it's going to be super expensive. The more reasonable is our Ebola protection kit that we have already.
There's no guarantees. When you release something like Ebola into the environment, and there are literally thousands of deadly viruses in labs around the world, when you release these things, those are doomsday viruses.
Oh, yeah, but believe it or not, we have antipathogenics that will knock all these out very simply, quickly, and easily. The problem is the public isn't going to told us. The doctors are knuckleheads. They're not going to give antivirals to the public because they're too expensive.
What would you recommend, Dr. Bill, that the average person keep on hand?
Number one, Nutridyne, which is a diatomic Tesla-activated iodine, Allicin Med, and Silver 100, immunoglobulins, Immunomax, Nutriimmune. And the Power C to stop the cytokine storm, NIOSH N95 masks, and defense wipes, which we have the Ebola. We have the Ebola protection. We have the Ebola protection kit,
and I imagine some of our listeners have.
Right, the Ebola protection kit and the first line of defense kit. Those two kits. And I tell people, do we have kits? So, and those are going to be, by the way, on sale this Labor Day weekend. I tell people, Ebola. They did a survey and they found that 40% of Americans think that Ebola is going to come and cause havoc and martial law in America, and over 85% believe Ebola is going to cause a lot of trouble in the United States and a lot of death. So I'll tell you, I don't think it's going to happen right away. I think that Africa is going to shut down. Financially, it's already dying because of Ebola. It's just shutting down business and international air transport. I think that, for example, in Nigeria, which is the fourth largest city on earth, Lagos, Nigeria, their oil business is going to shut right down, and foreigners that are doing the technical support, setting up communication lines, oil engineers, they're going to get the heck out of there because
it's already breaking out in the oil.
And when hotspots start to arise in Europe and elsewhere, they're not going to control this even with quarantine. Quarantine is another fallacy that you can do a 30-day quarantine and it's going to prevent the virus from spreading. Well, whenever it's spreading is to make sure that hosts can't get infected because they're carrying antipathogenics in their body. We have proper use of things to cleanse aircraft, for example, with ozone and Silver 100 aerosol sprays and ultraviolet lights to destroy the virus so that it can't exist on luggage that comes out of the aircraft belly or the seats inside it or the bathrooms. I mean, people start to use real simple logic. This is easy as hell to control, but they're not going to do it. They don't have HEPA filters with chain of custody going off to the lab.
Every classroom, and you're talking to Professor here, but every classroom should have both a HEPA filter and an ultraviolet light filter.
Right.
Because because you cram a lot of people in a relatively small space for an hour or 2-3 hours. Tend to be good incubators.
Which is why the flu will spread when people get to school, right? They get to school and then it spreads. Before we go, I want you to comment on the 2 tank columns from Russia into the eastern Ukraine.
Well, they're not Russians, but they are Russian tanks. There are some Russians manning.
They're on loan. Let's put it this way. Their support of let's put it this way. Their support of the Russian-trained separatists in Donetsk, Luhansk.
They're sending in armored, mechanized anti-aircraft missiles. They're sending in really good stuff.
Good stuff. Good Russian-made equipment. You have problem, Kiev.
Away, you know.
Very good. Back in a moment. Welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report. And our nuclear expert, Chris Ayers, that's his radio name, not his real name. You have to understand that. We're protecting his identity because his expertise, he has worked in Korea recently. He has friends that have gone at the site of the Fukushima Daiichi reactor. And he has worked on reports here for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, which is sidestepping the whole idea that Jasko, the previous director of the NRC, put up the recommendation to actually test seismic stabilization for reactors that are near within strike zone, like Diablo Canyon in Northern California, and the reactors near the New Madrid fault system, which, by the way, even the Walmart people that sell you underwear and really good steak, USDA choice, the best steak you can get anywhere, by the way, this is a secret, which is not a secret because they advertise it now. But they also are smart enough to realize that their big block wall buildings, which are really not very stable if there's an earthquake or fire or power blackout, they're actually testing to see if they're going to have major problems because they're near the strike zone of New Madrid. So Walmart has more sense than the NRC dealing with the danger of strikes causing either loss of power backup for these reactors, so they're going to lose containment and make them go critical, or China syndrome, or cause them to blow up, because you don't just get hydrogen explosions or steam explosions, you get nuclear explosions, and that can get messy, even if you just get a big vent. Poof. And we've had lots of big ventings that are never reported to the public. I remember when I worked in 1987-88 near the Savannah River plant at the Augusta Regional Trauma Center, they briefed us specifically from their safety group and gave us hazmat suits and everything, that if you have an accident or release, don't talk to the news. Ever. Or you'll be fired on the spot, as they say with a good Georgia accent. I'm going to fire you right now before you can take the next breath or heartbeat. Well, the fact is, they had a major release just the year before in 86. And there's so much radiation released that they actually had to take the vehicles in the parking lot because radiation dumped directly on it and actually build a great big hole and dump it right there on the spot and concrete cap it off. So don't believe them when they tell you that none of these radioactive reactors is safe. They all vent off thorium, tritium, and other radioisotopes. They all are leaky as heck. And they're always having accidents with the torus or their venting systems and containment, or they don't even have proper maintenance. They did a reactor outside of Chicago a few years ago, and they actually were scraping through the pipes with one of those brushes, and they pumped the brush right through the sidewall of the pipe, which is one of these major pipes that actually controls radioactive water separated from the regular water and the main reactor cooling elements. This is just south of Chicago. You remember that incident, don't you, Chris?
Yeah, it was the Braidwood plant.
The Braidwood plant, yeah. Now, what people don't understand is we're watching these SOBs, and we're asking tough questions. As they say, I'm going to, and you see, maybe I should be called the axe man of radio. I want to ask them some questions. Not ask, I want to ask them some questions. And I'm not getting answers, whether it's politicians or nuclear experts. Even people like Arnie Gunderson have clammed right up, just like, I don't know who they threatened. Did they threaten his wife, his daughter, himself? You threaten me, I'm not afraid to die, and I'm going to tell the truth no matter what, right to the last drop of oxygen leaves my body and my soul goes back to Jesus. I'm going to tell the truth. And what we have is a big mess. The northern hemisphere is becoming increasingly radioactive. We have a big mess. The intertidal region of the Georgia Strait, we proved with Dana Durnford, it's dead. It's not dying. It's gone. It's history. And we don't know how extensive the damage is all the way up to Alaska, but we know that the returning salmon, the smelts, all these other fish type, they're gone. They're not showing up at all. So let's go through some of these major reports, Chris, and go through what we have. The WIP reactor. That, by the way, the WIP reactor got back in the news because missing records, state radiation monitoring lapsed. What happened at WIP, which is a really good term for it? They're trying to whip us with lies. They're going to whip our butt with lies.
Well, it sure seems like that there's a combination of a cover-up and a combination of slipshod record keeping. Now, it's hard to tell whether they ditched those records after the fact or before the fact, but the records are non-existent, where one would expect really good records to be kept as to what is being stored, where it's being stored, when it was put away, when it was stored, all that stuff. Every bit of information that one would expect to have in a nuclear storage facility. And these are missing. So there's a lot of information.
These are basic records, like give an example. Container XA2VZ of X5RN4. That container went in on August 4th, 1987. We put it in XYZ container, reactor fuel, spent rods from, reactor such and such, a nuclear weapon that was dismantled on such and such a date. It was put in there with kitty litter, regular old style kitty litter, and it was packed and contained and put in Division A of the salt mine down tunnel XYZ, and this is where it's stored. I mean, that's what you damn well expect, but you're not hearing that from these fools. And you have the incompetence that now when the Department of Energy decided under the abominator bunch of morons decided to let's go green and kitty litter, they turned these into hydrogen bombs, which literally can cause critical explosions and plutonium all over the place, which we now know actually happened. And they still want to lie about how much it vented into the local fuel, which is only half a mile away, the local hydrofracking area, because all the area is just punctured like a nest of mosquitoes with, oil wells all over the dang place. That oil is going to become radioactively contaminated and gas, and they're not going to take the stuff out when it ends up in somebody's car driving from Kansas to Florida. People don't know that. They're like, no, it's fine. No, it's not necessarily fine. It's not necessarily fine. When you raise questions like this and you don't get answers, but you get, you realize like, tough question, no answer.
And if I'm reading that right, your friend with the southern accent probably worked there and probably told all the people who worked there, you better not say anything, or how did you say it? You'll be down the road like a hopping toad or something like that?
No, he said to me, he said, now you don't talk to the news at all, or you know the consequences. You'll be fired quicker than spit before your next heartbeat or breath.
Yeah. So anyway, that's it appears that more and more that's happening, because also more specifics are that state agencies that monitor for radiation were not activated or said to not be activated. The New Mexico response centers took a really long time to activate.
Right.
Greater than 13 hours. I mean, that's not much of an emergency response, is it?
Right. Now, last Thursday I did what I call a flow of consciousness kind of packed show, and afterward I got a call from Jeff Rentz, because I was actually coming back from dinner, so we only started about maybe 7-8 minutes after the hour, at 8 o'clock Pacific time. And he said, you packed more stuff in that hour than all the 20-some years of broadcasting I've had in any hour. I said, it's all facts, it's all verifiable, it's all this and that. Here's what's going to happen. We're having an increase in earthquakes caused by 3 major reasons. The first reason is, as you change the air into a plasma with Fukushima Daiichi, you increase the plasma discharge between weather systems in the ground, which cause earthquakes and volcanoes. So since Fukushima's happened, there's been a 500% increase in a number 5 level Richter scale earthquakes than before 3/11. We're also had a major quake, a 6.0 in Napa Valley, that's actually caused $60 billion with a B dollars of damage. That's a lot. And we know that's only the start of the kind of quakes in the whole Cascadia subduction zone. If you look historically, the Ring of Fire, the quakes tend to move clockwise around the fire. So it's going to hit the Aleutian Islands. It'll pop here and there. It went down to Northern California to Napa Valley. We're going to have the big quake that's going to hit and go through Los Angeles, the major vertical upthrust subduction zone. We're going to have the San Jacinto fault zone right off of San Onofre, within 4 to 5 miles, not 75 miles like the one off Japan, 4 to 5 miles. This is going to get very bad, and people aren't preparing, especially the NRC, for what could happen. Welcome back, and we're going to be back tomorrow with our fire line first hour. If you want to make questions, too, any hour except the first hour Friday, you can call on 800-259-5791. Drop an email if you go to Nutrimedical.com, or call into our order line, 888-212-8871. Our big sale starts tomorrow. It's going to be 7 for Heaven, sale upon sale, and we're going to have all kinds of things available. In fact, we have 15% on our water systems rather than 10% if you just use the code Nutrimed. $50 more off of Lumen Photons over the weekend only. And, of course, we have locked-in fixed international shipping prices, so if you're shipping to any country in the world, you don't only get the sale price, you get amazingly inexpensive shipping to anywhere on planet Earth. I tell people people better start prepping for things that are going to get rough. And I want to raise these questions. What I see happening is the globalists are determined to destroy the environment. Nobody's doing what we've talked about now for 3.5 years, which I'll be publishing here on disc, probably as early as this weekend. I'm actually going to say we'll start taking orders, because I'm going to post up the disc of what we call Book 1. This is not going to be the final book, because there are going to be other books, obviously, of the Fukushima. There'll be updates to the engineering designs and plans that we have to actually fix the site and protect people and nations, because the Pacific Ocean's dying, the Northern Hemisphere is dying, and eventually this death will spread to some extent to the Southern Hemisphere as well. It's all by design, and people should understand what the globalists want to do, and they've published it openly, is reduce the world population, geoengineer the human race, or the slave class that are left, or is vastly reduced, replace a lot of us with robotic manufacturing, use life extension and cybernetic technology to transform the upper class to a new super race of demigods. And people say, oh no, Dr. Deagle, they're not doing that. I said, you're an idiot. They are. They're planning on doing it. You talk to experts like Ray Kurzweil, who is a genius and a designer of technology at Google. You take people with IQs of 180 to 200 plus, you're not talking about people that are just kind of sort of smart. You're talking about people that can experiment and create things out of almost nothing. And it's like it says in Genesis, now they are in one place and of one tongue, i.e. the internet. Nothing shall be withheld from their imagination. Human imagination is boundless, which is why if we serve the Most High God, we can create heaven on earth, and if we don't, we create hell on earth, and that's where we're going. And that's why the truth will set you free, but you have to seek the truth. Like Jesus said, He is the way, the truth, and life. What I see happening, we got the blood moons going on, and even people who, mistake what I say when I come after the Israel. They say, oh, you're not really a Messianic Christian. Yes, I am. I'm a Messianic believer, but I believe in the true God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, not the false one of Sabbatean Talmudic Judaism that believes in the Sephiad Zira and all these other evil documents of the Talmud of Babylon and the commentaries by the rabbis, or the Satanism of high-level Masonry and Islam, or the Satanism of Jesuit CIA-type international intrigue that's trying to bring together the Abrahamic religions to have mind control of the entire population of the planet. We're not preparing ourselves for economic or radioactive devastation. We're not preparing ourselves for power blackouts if war spreads. We're not preparing ourselves for anything. And most people take for granted things like, well, yeah, our politicians representing us, or I got to believe my doctor. No, you don't have to believe your doctor. It's like before Ronald Reagan had too many aspartame-laced jelly beans and produced holes in his brain and later got cancer. Maybe it would be a good idea to kind of trust but verify, which is what he used to say. And I tell people what's going on right now is we don't have any verification. We don't verify Diablo Canyon safe, the WIP reactor site where the radiation was spread. We don't have verification that even Walmart's publicly saying they're going to check to make sure their Walmart stores aren't destroyed by a major earthquake and radiation plume caused by a New Madrid superquake that is very possible. The biggest quake in North America wasn't up in Alaska. It was in New Madrid. It literally created a lake 26 miles long. It created waves in the ground that are still stuck there after 100 and some years, 120 years. So we have to start asking tough questions. And don't assume because someone's qualified or they're the government or they're some corporate head or senior engineer that they really have the answers. If they can't answer your tough questions and you're just an intelligent person, whether your grandmother was grade 10, they're stupid or they're lying to you and they're putting you at risk, because anybody who doesn't have the truth is going to be a victim. So, Chris, with that kind of prelude, where do you see this going? I don't, we have Labor Day coming and we worry about industry and exposure of workers to danger. But where I see things going is I would say we have a terminal planet. Without the Most High God intervening, we're toast. And it intervenes through us, like us being brave, because we've taken the sword of truth, Jesus says, take out that sword of truth, and cut down evil. But evil is everywhere. Take the sword of truth, whether it's engineering truth about Fukushima, the sword of truth in terms of what health is, the sword of truth in geopolitics, or false religion that's a substitute I call real lies going on for a relationship with the Most High God. The sword of truth in every aspect of reality, because what we really are acting at, and this is a representative as sons of the Most High God, is we're acting in a prophetic and an apostolic anointing to tell people, ask the questions, find the truth, and take action. And I'm very concerned. If Fukushima really continues to salt North America, we're going to see major population centers like Seattle, Puget Sound, spraying down toward Portland, where my son and his wife, little boy, are, and she's pregnant now, going to deliver in April. It's going to continue spreading down, not only killing the sea life, but it's going to start spreading across the high altitudes across to Europe and elsewhere where it goes transpolar. We'll see mass migrations of people trying to run away like animals inside a cage, trying to get to the good side of the cage, away from North America to the southern hemisphere. And it won't just be House Hunter International, it'll be massive pandemonium. Especially when people realize what we're telling is not a delusion to sell stuff. It's, we've got to prepare yourself for something catastrophic that's not a theoretical thing. It's happening right now. In the midst of things like exposure to things like Ebola and other things that are massive super plagues that they've bioengineered in a weakened population that are perfectly ready to die very quickly, like Bruce Willis to Die Hard, because they're exposed to this crap that the globalist maniac engineers have made in a weakened population, eating garbage food, exposed to high amounts of radiation and radioisotopes, and now scalar radiation from smart meters and cell phones. People are going to, when this really starts to hit the fan and food becomes real short, famine starts to spread, it's going to get ugly. And people think, oh, you're just exaggerating. No, I'm not. And none of this needs to happen. None of it. Famine, shortage of food, shortage of energy, dropping of world oxygen concentration, ozone layer destruction because of nuclear plants popping all over the world. What do they think will happen if the power goes out and dozens or hundreds of reactors decide to go Fukushima? Bye-bye ozone layer. No more food. Any food you do have is not grown in a greenhouse with a water filtration system. It'll be radioactive. Have a nice day. Have your veggies of death. I mean, people don't understand this. This is a very dark future, and people don't understand. They think, oh, Deacle is just exaggerating. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. I'm not exaggerating at all.
You even see it. You see it everywhere where the powers that be are lining up not only to serve the false god or the other, or, not my God, not your God, but the false God, and recruiting heavily to get others to line up and to toe the line with it.
Well, a lot of them are told they're serving like
a good NRC inspector raising a concern at Diablo Canyon because he claimed that he's correct that it's not seismically safe for the changing conditions and seismic activity. That that his headquarters doesn't even believe him. Or excuse me, they're dragging their heels on any kind of action at all.
Well, they know it's there, but they're going to try to drag their heels and have another study. And they know that it's converging on 3 fault lines. There's 3 fault lines that convert right onto the Diablo Canyon. It's like, what do you think would happen with Fukushima? They had 1 fault line running right under reactor number 1. So long before the tsunami came, long before they swamped the diesel generators, reactor 1 already lost containment in the reactor core. And this is what people don't understand. There's a lot of reactors that are within strike distance of a real big quake that are going to lose containment immediately, long before the power's gone. They're going to start venting off massive amounts of radiation to population downwind. This is not pleasant. In Switzerland, 5 of the reactors all sit literally within less than 3 miles to 5 miles of a major fault line. Do you know that? All, not some, all of the reactors in Switzerland. All.
Correct.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, and the point is,
they want to delay to 2030.
A whistleball and we're
going to get around to it in 2030 or 2035. It's like, how come what was it? One of the very, very famous songs called Requiem. How about Requiem for a Planet? Requiem. It's a really good term, isn't it? It's kind of scary, though.
Yeah, it is scary talk.
It's scary stuff. But you know what? If we serve the Most High God, if we tell the truth, if we come out with the imagination filled with the spirit of creativity that God's given us, we can solve all these problems. They will disappear, as I say, like a vapor on an early morning sunshine across one of the fjords in Norway or in Scotland. But we have to serve God and the truth first. Thank you for listening. Ask better questions. Back tomorrow,